Put the old lady in the shed, Caroline whispered, as if I were nothing more than a broken chair taking up space. I stood just outside the kitchen doorway, my hand still resting on the wall, my breath caught somewhere between my chest and my pride. My own son said nothing, not a word. And in that silence, something inside me didn't shatter, it hardened. They thought I was weak. They thought I was alone. What they didn't know was that I already held the one secret that could bring Caroline's perfect life crashing down. Before I tell you what happened next, tell me, what would you have done if you heard your own family talk about you that way? If this story already stirs something in your heart, please like, subscribe, and share where you're watching from. And what time it is. I read every comment, and I'd love to hear yours. I didn't move when I heard those words. Not right away. There's a strange kind of silence that settles in when your dignity is being quietly stripped away. It doesn't come with shouting or slammed doors. It comes softly like a whisper behind your back, like a decision made about your life without you in the room. I stood there for a few seconds longer than I should have, then stepped back, careful not to let the floor creak beneath me. By the time I walked into the kitchen, Caroline was at the sink rinsing a glass, her expression composed as always. Michael was scrolling through his phone, his shoulders slightly hunched as if he already knew he had failed me. "Do you need anything?" Sophia Caroline asked, her voice warm, almost musical. I looked at her. Really looked this time. The soft smile. The perfect posture. The way her eyes flickered just for a fraction of a second, measuring, calculating. "No," I said gently. "I'm fine." And I meant it in a way she could never understand. 3 months earlier, I had sold my condo. It wasn't an impulsive decision. I had lived there for nearly 20 years, ever since my husband passed. It was small, quiet, and filled with memories that no longer felt like comfort, more like echoes. Michael had insisted it was time for a change. "Mom, you shouldn't be alone," he told me over dinner one evening. "We've got plenty of space. The farmhouse is huge. You'll have your own room, your own bathroom. It'll be good for all of us." I remember hesitating, not because I didn't love my son, but because something in his tone felt rehearsed. Still, I convinced myself I was being overly cautious. That's what we do when we want to believe in family. We soften the warning signs until they disappear. The farmhouse was beautiful. White siding, a wide front porch, tall oak trees lining the driveway. From the outside, it looked like something out of a magazine, warm, welcoming, perfect. Inside, it was something else entirely. Caroline ran that house like a stage. Every cushion placed just right, every surface spotless, every interaction controlled. At first, she was gracious. She showed me to my room down the hall, far from the master bedroom. She explained how the kitchen worked, where things were kept, what time they usually had dinner. It all sounded reasonable. But there were rules. Unspoken at first, then very clear. "Michael works from home sometimes," she told me on my second day. "So it's best to keep noise to a minimum during business hours." "I understand," I said. "And the office is off limits. It's confidential work." Of course it was. Then came the smaller things. She rearranged my belongings when I wasn't in the room, moved my suitcase to the closet without asking, folded my clothes in a way that made it clear they had been inspected. Once I came back from a short walk and found my purse unzipped on the bed. When I asked about it, she smiled lightly. "Oh, I thought I heard your phone ringing inside. I didn't want you to miss anything. I checked later. No missed calls." The shed was the first thing that truly unsettled me. It sat about 20 yards behind the house near the edge of the tree line. Small, weathered, with a slanted roof and a single window that looked like it hadn't been cleaned in years. The first time I walked toward it, just out of curiosity, Caroline appeared almost instantly. "Oh, that's just storage," she said, quickly stepping beside me. "Nothing interesting back there." "I was just looking," I replied. "No need," she said, still smiling, but her hand lightly touched my arm, guiding me back toward the house. It was subtle, but it was firm. After that, I noticed how often she glanced toward the shed, not casually, carefully, as if it held something she didn't want disturbed. The mail started going missing about 2 weeks in. At first, I assumed it was a simple delay. Then one afternoon, I saw Caroline at the kitchen counter sorting through envelopes. My name was clearly printed on one of them. "Oh, that came earlier," she said when she noticed me watching. "I was going to bring it to you." She handed it over with a soft smile. It had already been opened. "Thank you," I said, keeping my voice steady. Later that night, I checked my bank account online. There had been a request and inquiry into my assets. Nothing completed but enough to raise a question. I didn't mention it. Not yet. Emma was the only one who felt real in that house. 12 years old with quiet eyes and a habit of observing more than she spoke. She reminded me of myself at that age, always listening, always noticing what others tried to hide. One evening she came into my room and sat at the edge of the bed. "Grandma," she said softly, "do you ever feel like Mom is different when no one's watching?" I looked at her carefully. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" She hesitated, then lowered her voice. "She lies sometimes. About small things. And sometimes she leaves at night. She says it's errands, but she doesn't take anything with her." A chill ran through me. "Have you told your dad?" I asked. She shook her head. "He wouldn't believe me." I reached for her hand and gave it a gentle squeeze. "You did the right thing telling me." And in that moment I realized something important. I wasn't the only one who felt it. That quiet wrongness in the house, that sense that something beneath the surface wasn't just unpleasant, it was dangerous. A few days later I found confirmation. It happened by accident. Caroline had left her office door slightly open, just a crack. That alone was unusual. She was meticulous about keeping it closed. I walked past it slowly, not intending to intrude, but then I saw it. A document lying on the desk, partially visible through the opening. A name. Not Caroline Bennett. Another name entirely. One I hadn't seen in years. My heart stopped. Because months before I ever moved into that house while volunteering at the county archives, I had come across a legal file, old, nearly forgotten. And in that file was the same name. Connected to something that never quite made sense. Something that had been buried, quietly. I didn't step into the room that day. I didn't need to. Because in that single glance I understood something that Caroline Bennett had spent years trying to erase. And suddenly her interest in my mail, her control over the house, her fear of the shed, none of it felt random anymore. I returned to my room, closed the door, and sat down slowly. For the first time since I arrived, I wasn't just uncomfortable. I was certain. Caroline wasn't just hiding something. She was protecting it. And now, she knew I might be the one person who could uncover it. I have always believed that first impressions don't lie. We just learn how to ignore them. The first time I met Caroline Bennett was 7 years ago in a bright little cafe in downtown Raleigh. Michael had called me the night before, his voice lighter than I had heard it in years. "Mom, I want you to meet someone," he said. There was something in the way he said it, hopeful, almost boyish, that made me say yes before he even finished the sentence. Caroline arrived 10 minutes late. Not flustered, not apologetic, just perfectly composed. She wore a cream-colored dress, her hair pinned back in a style that looked effortless but was anything but. When she smiled, it was practiced wide enough to be warm, controlled enough to reveal nothing. "Sophia, I've heard so much about you," she said, leaning in just close enough to suggest intimacy without actually offering it. I remember shaking her hand and thinking, this woman is very careful. Not kind, careful. But Michael looked at her like she was something rare and irreplaceable. And when your child looks at someone that way, you silence the small voice inside you that says, pay attention. You tell yourself love will fill in the gaps. It doesn't. It just hides them better. In the present, sitting in that farmhouse that never quite felt like home, I realized how many of those early signs I had dismissed. Caroline never forgot. She asked questions without answering them. She listened without ever truly engaging. And most of all, she controlled what people saw. To the outside world, she was the ideal wife, the devoted mother, the woman who hosted charity dinners and remembered everyone's birthdays. Inside the house, she was something else entirely. Measured, watchful, and increasingly tense. It was Emma who began connecting the dots before I did. Children see what adults rationalize away. One afternoon, she came into the kitchen while I was making tea. Caroline had just left the house, no explanation, no purse, no phone in hand. Emma stood there for a moment, then said quietly, "She'll be gone for about 40 minutes. I turned to her. "How do you know that she always is?" Emma replied. "On Wednesdays." There was no drama in her voice. Just certainty. "Where does she go?" I asked. Emma shrugged. "She doesn't say, but she always comes back. And she's different." Different how Emma hesitated, then looked at me in a way that made my chest tighten. Like she's trying to act normal again. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every small moment I had brushed aside. The open mail, the locked office, the shed, the name on that document. And now, the weekly disappearances. It wasn't one thing, it was a pattern. And patterns don't lie. The next morning, something happened that confirmed my fears weren't just suspicion, they were intention. I came downstairs earlier than usual, just after 6. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels almost staged. Caroline was already in the kitchen. That alone was unusual. She wasn't cooking, she wasn't making coffee. She was standing by the counter holding my checkbook. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she smiled. "Oh, Sophia, I didn't hear you come down." I stepped closer, keeping my voice calm. "That's mine." She glanced down at the checkbook as if she had just noticed it. "Oh, I know. I was just organizing some things. The mail got mixed up again." I held out my hand. She hesitated. Just for a second, then she handed it over. "I hope you don't mind," she added lightly. "I worry about things slipping through the cracks. At our age, it's easy to forget details like this. At our age, there it was, the beginning of a narrative." I met her gaze steady and unblinking. I've never forgotten anything important in my life. Her smile didn't fade, but something behind it shifted. Later that afternoon, I checked the checkbook carefully. A page had been removed. Cleanly, not torn, taken. My pulse slowed, not from fear, but from clarity. This wasn't careless behavior. This was deliberate. Caroline wasn't just observing me. She was preparing something. That evening, I sat down with Emma again. We didn't speak about her mother directly. Not at first. Instead, we talked about school, about her favorite books, about the kind of life she imagined for herself. But eventually, she looked at me and said, "Grandma, do you think people can pretend to be someone else for a long time?" I chose my words carefully. "Yes, some people can." "Why?" she asked. "Because the truth wouldn't give them what they want." Emma nodded slowly, as if that confirmed something she already suspected. Then she said something that made my heart sink. "I found a different name once." I froze. "What do you mean? In Mom's drawer," she said. "A long time ago. It wasn't Caroline." I thought maybe it was a mistake, but she got really mad when she saw me looking at it. The room felt smaller suddenly. "Do you remember the name?" I asked gently. Emma shook her head. "No." But it wasn't hers. I reached across the table and took her hand. "Emma," I said softly, "you must never go into that drawer again. Do you understand me?" Her eyes widened slightly. "Am I in trouble?" "No," I said quickly. "Not at all. I just want you to be safe." She nodded, but I could see the question in her eyes. The same one forming in my own mind. That night I sat alone in my room with the old folder I had kept hidden in my suitcase. I hadn't planned to bring it. But something, some instinct I couldn't explain, had told me not to leave it behind. Inside was a photocopy. Faded, barely legible in places, but clear enough. A probate filing. A name, Caroline Hayes. Not Bennett. Hayes. And beneath it, a reference to testimony in the estate case of Laura Cole. I traced the name slowly with my finger, my chest tightening, because I remembered that case. Not in detail, but enough. A young woman dead, questions about her inheritance, conflicting statements, and then silence. The file had simply ended. No resolution. No closure. Just gone. As if someone had decided it was better that way. I closed the folder carefully and placed it back in my suitcase. For years, I had told myself it was nothing. A coincidence. A name shared by someone else. But now I was living in the same house as that name. Watching her. Being watched by her. And suddenly everything made sense in a way I couldn't ignore. Caroline wasn't just protecting her image. She was protecting a past that had never been properly buried. And the worst part, she knew I was getting close. I could see it in the way she looked at me now. Not with annoyance, not even with dislike, but with calculation. Like someone deciding how to remove a problem before it speaks. If you want to understand who someone truly is, don't watch them when they're alone. Watch them when they're being admired. That's when the performance is at its most polished. And that night, Caroline Bennett performed beautifully. The church fundraiser was her stage. She had been preparing for it all week, menus planned down to the last garnish floral arrangements delivered that morning, seating carefully arranged to ensure the right people sat beside each other. From the outside, it was impeccable. From the inside, I could see the strain. "Can you stay out of the kitchen tonight?" she asked me, earlier that afternoon, her tone light but unmistakably firm. "It gets crowded, and I don't want you to feel overwhelmed." Overwhelmed. That word again, a gentle way of pushing me aside. "I'll manage," I replied. Her smile flickered. "Of course you will." But when the guests arrived, I noticed something interesting. She never let me get too close to anything that mattered. Not the serving table, not the wine, not even the guest list. I was placed politely, strategically on the edge of everything. Visible, but not involved. The house filled quickly. Laughter echoed through the halls. Glasses clinked. Compliments flowed easily. "Caroline, this is just stunning. You outdid yourself again. Michael, you're a lucky man." And there he was, my son, smiling beside her, nodding, accepting praise that wasn't his. He looked proud. He looked comfortable. And he looked unaware. I stood near the window for most of the evening watching, listening. Caroline moved through the room like she belonged to it. Every gesture measured, every laugh perfectly timed. But there were cracks, small ones. The way her eyes darted toward the hallway every few minutes. The way she checked her phone more often than necessary. The way her smile tightened just slightly whenever someone mentioned finances, investments, or long-term plans. No one else noticed, but I did, because I wasn't watching the performance. I was watching the person behind it. About halfway through the evening, Emma slipped quietly beside me. "You see it too, don't you?" she whispered. I glanced down at her. "See what?" "She's nervous," Emma said. "She's only like this when something's wrong." I followed Caroline with my eyes. She was laughing at something a woman had just said, but her hand was gripping the edge of the counter so tightly her knuckles had gone pale. "Yes," I said softly. "I see it." Emma nodded, as if that confirmed something important. Then she slipped away, back into the crowd. Dinner went smoothly. Too smoothly. And that's always the moment you should be most careful. Because perfection is often a distraction. It happened during cleanup. Most of the guests had left. A few lingered in the living room, finishing drinks and sharing stories. I offered to help with the dishes, but Caroline waved me off. "You've done enough just being here," she said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. So I stepped back. But I didn't go far. I moved down the hallway instead, intending to give her space. That's when I heard it. Her voice. Low. Sharp. Nothing like the one she had used all evening. "I told you not to call me here." I stopped. The door to the office was closed, but not fully. Just enough for the sound to slip through. I shouldn't have listened. But sometimes, not listening is more dangerous. "I said I'd handle it," she continued, her tone tight. "You don't get to just show up whenever you feel like it." There was a pause. I couldn't hear the other voice. Only hers. "No," she snapped. "I don't have it yet." Another pause. Then quieter. "Lower your voice." My heart began to beat a little faster. "I'm not afraid of you," she said. But she was. I could hear it now. Beneath the anger. Beneath the control. Fear. "Don't say that name," she hissed suddenly. "Not here." Silence. Then one word, barely above a whisper. "Ryan." My breath caught. Ryan. The name settled into my mind like something heavy and familiar, because I had heard it before. Not recently, but long enough ago that it had almost faded. Almost. "I told you that part is over," Caroline continued, her voice shaking slightly now. "That was years ago. It has nothing to do with now." Another pause. Longer this time. And when she spoke again, her voice was different. Lower. More desperate. "What do you want?" The answer must have come quickly, because she didn't hesitate. "That's not possible," she said. A beat. Then barely audible, "I've already given you enough." My fingers tightened against the wall. Money. It had to be money. "Listen to me," she said, her voice rising again, then dropping just as fast. "You don't understand what you're asking." Another pause. And then, "If he finds out," she stopped, as if she had said too much. My chest tightened. "If he finds out." Michael. She was talking about Michael. "I'll call you tomorrow," she said abruptly. "Not here, not again." And then the line went dead. I stepped back just as the door opened. Caroline walked out, her expression composed but only just. When she saw me standing in the hallway, she froze. Only for a second, but it was enough. "Oh," she said, recovering quickly. "Sophia, I didn't realize you were still up." I couldn't sleep, I replied calmly. She studied me, not openly, not obviously, but I felt it. That careful assessment, that silent question. How much did she hear? Everything okay? I asked. Her smile returned. Perfect. Controlled. Yes, she said. Just a work call. Nothing important. I nodded. Of course. We stood there for a moment longer than necessary. Then she turned and walked back toward the kitchen. But as she passed me, I caught something in her expression. Not anger, not even suspicion. Recognition. As if for the first time she understood something about me she hadn't fully considered before. I returned to my room, slowly closing the door behind me. My hands were steady, my breathing calm, but inside, everything had shifted, because now I had more than suspicion. I had confirmation. A name. Ryan. A connection to the past I had seen buried in those old documents, and most importantly, proof that whatever Caroline was hiding, it wasn't over. It was still happening. Right now. I sat down on the edge of the bed and stared at the wall for a long moment. Then I reached into my suitcase and pulled out the folder again. Caroline Hayes, Laura Cole, Ryan. The pieces were beginning to align. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough. Enough to see the shape of something dangerous, something unfinished. And suddenly, the shed didn't feel like storage anymore. It felt like a place where things were kept out of sight, out of reach, out of question. I closed the folder and placed it back carefully. Because one thing was certain now, Caroline wasn't just protecting a secret, she was paying for it. And whatever that secret was, someone out there was making sure she never forgot. The next morning, the house felt different. Not louder, not more tense in any obvious way, just shifted. Like something invisible had been moved slightly out of place and no one wanted to acknowledge it. Caroline moved through the kitchen, as she always did, measured, precise, efficient. But there was a new sharpness to her movements, a fraction of a second too quick when she turned, a little too deliberate when she set things down. She knew. Not everything, but enough. And that meant I had to be careful. "Good morning," she said, pouring coffee into 2 identical white mugs. Her tone was light. Too light. "Morning," I replied, taking my usual seat. She placed a cup in front of me, then sat across the table, folding her hands neatly as if we were about to discuss something important. I was thinking, she began, it might be a good idea to make a few adjustments around the house. I looked at her over the rim of my cup. "What kind of adjustments?" "Nothing major," she said quickly. "Just small things to make everything run more smoothly." There it was again. That language. Soft, harmless, but always leading somewhere. "I've noticed you've seemed a little overwhelmed lately," she continued. "And I worry that the house might be too much for you to keep up with." I set the cup down slowly. "I'm not overwhelmed," I said. Her smile didn't change. "Of course. But sometimes it's not about what we feel, it's about what others see. Others." She was building something. A narrative. Michael came into the kitchen just then, his tie slightly crooked, his attention already divided between his phone and whatever problem waited for him outside the house. "Morning," he said absently. "Michael," Caroline said smoothly, "we were just talking about making things a little easier for your mom." He glanced up briefly. "Easier how?" "Just simplifying her space," she said. "Giving her somewhere quieter, less busy." Michael nodded without really thinking. "That sounds reasonable." I watched him carefully. He hadn't asked me. Hadn't even looked at me. Just agreed. Because it was easier. Later that day, I found my room rearranged. Again. But this time, it wasn't just small things. My books had been packed into a box. My suitcase moved to the corner. The chair by the window where I liked to sit in the afternoons was gone. I stood in the doorway, taking it all in. Caroline appeared behind me. "I hope you don't mind," she said. "I thought we could start transitioning things slowly. It's better not to rush these changes." "Changes?" I asked. She stepped into the room, smoothing the edge of the bedspread. "Yes," she said lightly. "I spoke with a specialist this morning, someone who helps families when adjustments are needed." My chest tightened, not with fear, but with clarity. "You spoke with a specialist," I repeated. "Yes," she said, "just to explore options. There's no need to worry." No need to worry. That's what people say when there's every reason to. That afternoon, Emma found me sitting on the edge of my bed, staring at the half-packed box. "They're trying to move you," she said quietly. I looked up at her. "What makes you say that I heard Mom on the phone again?" she replied. She said something about documentation and evaluation. Evaluation. The words settled heavily in the room. "Emma," I said gently, "has your mother ever taken you to meet someone like that before?" She shook her head. "No." But she sounded different, like she was planning something. I nodded slowly. Because she was, and it was becoming clearer by the hour. That evening, I decided to test something. Not confrontationally, not directly, just enough to see how far she had gone. At dinner, I mentioned something that hadn't happened. "I stopped by the bank today," I said casually. "They were asking about an inquiry on my account." Caroline's fork paused, just for a fraction of a second. Then she continued eating. "Oh," she said, "that's strange." "It is," I agreed. "Especially since I didn't make the request." Michael looked up, frowning slightly. "What kind of inquiry?" "Just a routine asset check," I said. "Nothing serious." Caroline smiled faintly. "Banks make mistakes all the time." "Do they?" I asked, meeting her eyes. "Yes," she said. "More often than you'd think." I held her gaze for a moment longer. Then I nodded. "Good to know." After dinner, I went for a walk. Not far, just down the driveway and back. But when I returned, I saw something that made me stop. Caroline's car was gone. Emma had said Wednesdays. 40 minutes. I checked the clock in the hallway. 6:12 p.m. I sat down in the living room and waited. 6:18, 6:25, 6:41. At exactly 6:52, I heard the car pull into the driveway. Emma had been right. Caroline walked in a minute later, her expression composed, but there was a tension in her shoulders she hadn't fully smoothed out yet. "Everything okay?" I asked from the couch. She turned toward me, just slightly startled. "Oh, yes. Just errands." I nodded. "You were gone about 40 minutes. Her eyes narrowed just a fraction. "I didn't realize you were timing me." "I wasn't," I said calmly. "Emma mentioned it. That did it. The mask didn't fall, but it cracked." "Emma shouldn't be paying attention to things that don't concern her," Caroline said, her voice cooler now. "Children notice what adults try to hide," I replied. Silence settled between us, thick, uncomfortable. Then she smiled again. But this time, it didn't reach her eyes at all. "I think it would be best if we kept things simple moving forward," she said. "For everyone's sake." That night, I couldn't sleep again. Not because I was afraid, but because everything was aligning too clearly. The missing mail, the checkbook page, the phone calls, the name, the weekly disappearances, the sudden talk of evaluation. She wasn't improvising. She was executing. Step by step, carefully. I sat at the small desk in my room and opened my notebook. For the first time, I began writing everything down. Dates, times, conversations, exact words, not just for memory, for proof. Because if Caroline was building a case against me, then I needed one of my own. Around midnight, I reached for my phone and scrolled to Judith's number. I hadn't spoken to her since before I moved, but if there was anyone who would understand what I was facing, it was her. She picked up on the second ring. "Sophia," she said, her voice immediately alert. "Is everything okay?" I hesitated for just a moment. Then I said the truth. "No," I said quietly. "It's not." There was a pause. Then calm and steady, "Tell me everything." And so I did. From the beginning. The move, the house, the behavior, the name, the shed, the phone calls, the missing money, everything. When I finished, there was silence on the other end of the line. Not doubt, not confusion, recognition. "I've seen this before," Judith said finally. My grip on the phone tightened. "What do you mean isolation?" she said. "Control of finances, subtle discrediting, positioning you as unstable." My heart slowed, not from fear but from certainty. "She's building a case," Judith continued, "and if she succeeds, she could have legal grounds to make decisions on your behalf." I closed my eyes. That was it. That was the plan. Not just to move me, not just to silence me, but to erase my authority entirely. "What do?" I asked. There was no panic in my voice now, only focus. Judith didn't hesitate. "You document everything she said. You keep copies somewhere safe, and most importantly," she paused, "you do not confront her directly." "Not yet." I nodded slowly. Because I understood. This wasn't a fight you win with emotion. It was a fight you win with patience. I hung up the phone and sat there for a long time in the dark, listening, thinking, waiting. Because now, for the first time since I arrived, I wasn't reacting anymore. I was preparing. And if Caroline Bennett believed she could quietly move me out of her life, then she had made one very serious mistake. She had underestimated me. There are moments in life when a memory you once dismissed returns not as a possibility but as a warning you failed to heed. That night, after my call with Judith, I didn't go to bed. I sat at the small desk by the window, the house wrapped in silence, and opened the folder I had kept hidden for years. For a long time I had told myself it was nothing, a coincidence, a name shared by someone else. But now, there was no room left for comforting explanations. Only truth. I spread the papers out carefully. They were old, photocopies, slightly faded edges worn from being handled too many times. At the top of the first page, Wake County Probate Filing Estate of Laura Cole. Below it in smaller print, Witness Statement. Caroline Hayes. My eyes lingered on the name. Hayes. Not Bennett. Not the woman my son married. The woman she used to be. I remembered the day I found it. It had been a quiet afternoon at the county archives. I was volunteering twice a week back then, helping organize older legal documents and newspaper records. Most of what I handled was routine, property transfers, minor disputes, forgotten paperwork no one cared about anymore. But sometimes, something stood out. This file had. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was incomplete. Laura Cole, 28 years old. Declared deceased under circumstances that were never fully detailed in the public summary. No clear cause listed. No extended report. Just concluded. Too cleanly. But what caught my attention wasn't Laura. It was the witness, Caroline Hayes. Her statement had been included in the filing, brief, controlled, and oddly precise. She described timelines, locations, conversations. But there was something off about it. It answered questions no one had asked, and avoided the ones that mattered. At the time, I had felt a flicker of unease. But I wasn't an investigator, just a librarian. So I filed it away literally and mentally, until months later. When Michael told me about the woman he was going to marry, I remember the first time I heard her full name. Caroline Bennett, he said, and something inside me paused. Not loudly, not urgently, just enough to notice. It wasn't until years later, after they were married, after Emma was born, that I came across the file again while sorting older records. And this time I looked closer. The dates aligned, the age matched, and when I saw a photograph attached to a related document, grainy, black and white, barely clear, I felt it. That quiet, unmistakable certainty. It was her, younger, different hair, different expression, but the same woman. I never told Michael. Not then, because what did I have? A suspicion, an old file, a feeling, and feelings are not enough to destroy a marriage, especially not your son's. So I kept it, folded it, placed it in a folder, and told myself I would only revisit it if I ever had to. Now, sitting in that farmhouse listening to the silence that wasn't really silence at all, I knew. This was the moment I had been saving it for. I picked up the second document, a supplemental note, not official, handwritten, likely from someone involved in the case. It mentioned a name, Ryan Cole, Laura's brother. My pulse slowed as everything began to connect. Ryan, the man on the phone, the one demanding money, the one Caroline feared. The note itself was brief, but it said enough. Discrepancies in witness timeline. Caroline Hayes present before and after estimated incident window. Financial transfers unclear. No follow-up ordered. No follow-up ordered. I stared at those words, because they didn't mean there was no problem. They meant someone had decided not to look deeper. I leaned back in the chair, closing my eyes for a moment, and for the first time I allowed myself to consider something I had avoided until now. Caroline hadn't just changed her name. She had walked away from something unfinished, something unresolved, and whatever it was, Ryan hadn't forgotten. A soft knock on my door pulled me back. Sophia, Emma's voice. I quickly gathered the papers and slid them back into the folder. "Come in," I said. She stepped inside, closing the door behind her. I couldn't sleep, she said. Neither could I replied gently. She hesitated, then walked over and sat beside me. Grandma, are we in trouble? The question was simple, but it carried weight far beyond her years. I turned to her, choosing honesty but carefully. No, I said, but we need to be very aware of what's happening around us. She nodded slowly. I heard Mom again tonight, she said. On the phone. My heart tightened. What did she say? Emma looked down at her hands. She said, I already paid you. And you promised it was over. A chill ran through me. Did she say anything else? Emma shook her head, just that she'd meet him soon. Meet him. Not call. Not send money. Meet. That changed things. Emma, I said softly, I need you to listen to me very carefully. She looked up. If anything ever feels wrong, if your mom asks you to do something that makes you uncomfortable, you come to me. Immediately. Do you understand? She nodded. Yes. And you don't go near the shed, I added. Her eyes widened slightly. I wasn't going to, she said quickly. I know, I said, but I want to be very clear. She hesitated, then whispered, Mom keeps a key. My breath caught. A key, Emma nodded. On her keychain. But she hides it sometimes. Of course she did. After Emma left, I sat there in the dark, the pieces falling into place faster now. Caroline wasn't just hiding her past. She was actively dealing with it, paying for it, meeting it, containing it, and the shed. It wasn't storage. It was a boundary, a place she controlled completely, a place no one else was meant to see. I stood slowly and walked to the window. The backyard stretched out in shadows, the faint outline of the shed visible near the trees. Still, silent, but no longer meaningless. For a moment I considered going out there. Right then, finding out what she was hiding, but Judith's voice echoed in my mind, you do not confront her. Not yet. She was right. This wasn't about curiosity. It was about timing. I turned back to the desk and opened my notebook again. This time I added more. Ryan Cole, brother of Laura Cole, Caroline Hayes equals Caroline Bennett, ongoing payments, possible meeting soon, shed equals controlled access location. I underlined the last point twice. Then I closed the notebook and sat there very still. Because now, this wasn't just suspicion anymore. It was structure. A pattern with clear intent. Caroline Bennett had built a new life on top of something that was never truly buried. And now, that past was clawing its way back, demanding payment, demanding silence. And the most dangerous part, she was willing to sacrifice anything to keep it hidden. Even me. I looked toward the door, then back at the window, at the shed, at the darkness beyond it. And for the first time since this all began, I wasn't just trying to understand what Caroline had done. I was preparing for what she might do next. The next day began too quietly. Not the kind of quiet that brings peace, but the kind that waits. I felt it the moment I stepped into the hallway. The air itself seemed thinner, stretched tight between what had already been said and what was coming. Caroline was in the kitchen as usual. But today she didn't greet me right away. She stood at the counter slicing fruit with slow, deliberate movements. The knife touched the board with soft, even sounds too controlled to be casual. Michael wasn't there. Emma had already left for school. Which meant this wasn't an accident. Good morning, I said calmly. Caroline paused, then turned to face me. Her smile appeared, but it came late. Good morning, Sophia, she said. You're up early. I didn't sleep much. Neither did I, she replied. There was a beat of silence. Then she gestured toward the table. Sit, she said gently. We should talk. I took my seat. Not because she asked, but because I wanted to see where this would go. Caroline set the knife down carefully and joined me, folding her hands on the table like someone preparing to deliver news she had rehearsed. I've been thinking a lot about your situation, she began. My situation, I repeated. Yes, she said. Your comfort, your well-being. I said nothing. Let her continue. Michael and I both feel that the current arrangement may not be the best fit for you, she said smoothly. This house is busy. There's a lot going on. It can be overwhelming. There's that word again, I said quietly. She ignored it. I spoke with a consultant yesterday, she continued. Someone who specializes in helping families transition elderly relatives into more appropriate environments. There it was. Not subtle anymore. Not soft. Clear. Direct. Calculated. And what kind of environment would that be? I asked. Her eyes held mine. A quieter space, she said. More private, less demanding. The shed? I asked. She didn't flinch. Not this time. Yes, she said. The honesty was almost impressive. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then I leaned back slightly in my chair. You said something yesterday, I began. Her expression didn't change. I say many things, she replied. Put the old lady in the shed, I said calmly. The room went still. Not dramatically. Not loudly. Just still. Caroline didn't deny it. Didn't pretend. Didn't even look surprised. Instead, she tilted her head slightly and studied me in a way she hadn't before, as if she had just crossed a line and decided there was no reason to step back. You weren't supposed to hear that, she said. No, I agreed. I wasn't. Another pause. Then she exhaled softly. Well, she said, I suppose that simplifies things. There it was. No more performance. No more careful language. Just truth. Cold and direct. I'm going to be very clear with you, Sophia, she continued. Her voice had changed. Gone was the warmth. Gone was the politeness. What remained was something sharper, more precise. You are not as invisible as you think, she said, and that makes you complicated. I felt a small, steady calm settle inside me. Complicated, how I asked. Her lips curved slightly. You notice things, she said. You ask questions without asking them. You observe. She leaned forward just slightly. And that makes people uncomfortable. Only people who have something to hide, I replied. Her smile didn't fade, but her eyes hardened. Let's not pretend this is about morality, she said. This is about stability. Yours, I asked. Ours, she corrected smoothly. Michael's career. Emma's future. The life we've built. And I'm a threat to that, I said. She didn't hesitate. Yes, there it was. No disguise, no apology, just truth. I nodded slowly. And what exactly do you think I'm going to do? I asked. Caroline leaned back, folding her arms now. That depends, she said, on how cooperative you choose to be. Cooperative, I repeated. Yes, she said. If you accept a quieter arrangement, if you allow us to manage things without interference, then there's no need for anything unpleasant. And if I don't, her eyes held mine. Steady, unblinking. Then people may begin to notice changes, she said. Confusion, forgetfulness, unreliable behavior. The words landed exactly as intended. A threat. Not loud, not dramatic, but devastatingly clear. You're planning to declare me incompetent, I said. She tilted her head slightly. I'm planning to protect my family, she replied. I sat there for a moment, letting the silence stretch between us, because now everything was out in the open. No more guessing, no more wondering, just truth and intention. You're afraid, I said quietly. That caught her off guard, just slightly. I don't think you understand, she began. No, I interrupted gently. I do. I leaned forward now, mirroring her earlier posture. You're not doing this because I'm old, I said. You're doing this because you're running out of options. Her expression tightened. Barely. But enough. You've been paying someone, I continued, for something you don't want anyone else to know. Her hands stilled. You've been moving money, I added, intercepting mail, creating distance. Her eyes flickered. There's a name, I said softly. Ryan. That did it. The mask didn't just crack. It broke. Not completely, but enough to see what lay beneath. Be very careful, she said quietly. Not angry. Not raised. Just controlled. But there was something else there now. Something real. Fear. I've been careful my entire life, I replied. And I've been patient, she said. We stared at each other across the table. Two women, two truths, two very different reasons for staying silent. Michael doesn't know, I said. No, she agreed. And Emma, I asked. Her jaw tightened. She doesn't need to, she said. I nodded slowly. Because that told me everything I needed to know. You're not protecting your family, I said quietly. You're protecting yourself. For a moment, I thought she might lose control. Not dramatically, but enough to reveal something irreversible. Instead, she smiled. Slowly, carefully, rebuilding the mask piece by piece. Believe whatever helps you sleep at night, she said, standing up. Then she picked up the knife again and returned to the counter. Conversation over. But something had changed. Not just between us. Within her. Because now she knew. I wasn't guessing anymore. And I knew. She was willing to go further than I had hoped. That night, I didn't need to listen for anything. I didn't need to guess. Because around 10:30 p.m., I heard it again. Her voice, low, sharp, from the hallway. Just do it, she said. A pause. Then I don't care how it looks. We can't keep delaying this. Another pause. And then, the words that settled deep in my chest. Put her in the shed. This time I didn't move. Didn't react. Didn't even breathe differently. Because just beyond her voice, I heard something else. A floorboard creak. Small, soft, but unmistakable. Emma. She had heard it too. And in that moment I realized something that shifted everything. This wasn't just about me anymore. There was a witness. And Caroline Bennett had just made a mistake she couldn't take back. The next morning, Caroline behaved as if nothing had happened. That more than anything told me she had already decided how this would go. People like her don't repeat threats unless they're ready to act on them. Good morning, she said, placing a plate of toast in front of Michael. Her voice was light again. Easy. Almost cheerful. Michael barely looked up. Morning. Emma sat quietly at the table, her eyes fixed on her glass of juice. She didn't speak, didn't move much. But I could see it in her shoulders, tight, guarded. She had heard everything. And she was afraid. I took my seat slowly. Caroline glanced at me, then smiled. I've been thinking about what we discussed yesterday, she said. We didn't discuss anything, I replied calmly. Her smile didn't falter. We outlined a direction she corrected. And I've already taken steps to make it more comfortable for you. Michael looked between us confused. What's going on, he asked. Nothing serious, Caroline said quickly. Just some adjustments to give your mom a quieter space. Somewhere she can relax without all the activity. Michael nodded slowly. That might actually be good, Mom. You've seemed stressed. I looked at him, not angry, not even surprised. Just seeing him clearly. I'm not stressed, I said. Caroline reached for her coffee. Of course not, she murmured. After breakfast, Michael left for work. Emma lingered by the doorway before following Caroline out to the car. She looked back at me once. Just once. But it was enough. She knew. And she was waiting. Caroline returned alone about 20 minutes later, which meant Emma had been dropped off at school, which meant I was alone with her. Would you like to see it? She asked, setting her keys on the counter. See what? The space, she said. I've had it cleaned. It's actually quite nice now. I stood slowly. Lead the way. We walked outside in silence. The morning air was cool, the kind that usually brings a sense of calm. But not today. Today, every step felt deliberate, measured, final. The shed stood exactly where it always had, near the edge of the trees, its faded paint and small window giving nothing away. Caroline reached into her pocket and pulled out a key, not her main keychain, a separate one. Just as Emma had said. She unlocked the door and stepped aside. After you, she said. I walked in. The smell hit me first. Not unpleasant, but not clean either. Old wood, dust, something faintly metallic beneath it. The space had been rearranged. A small bed pushed against one wall. A thin mattress. A folded blanket. A chair. A single lamp plugged into an extension cord running along the floor. It wasn't unlivable. But it wasn't meant to be lived in. It's simple, Caroline said behind me, but peaceful. I turned slowly, taking it all in. No heating, I said. It's mild this time of year. No proper insulation. You'll have blankets. No bathroom. You can come to the house when needed. I looked at her. Really looked at her. You've thought this through, I said. She nodded. I always do. There was a moment of silence. Then I stepped further inside, and that's when I saw them. Boxes. Stacked in the far corner. Not new, not part of the cleaning. Old. Forgotten. Caroline noticed my gaze immediately. That's just storage, she said quickly. Of course it was. Everything inconvenient was just storage. I walked toward the boxes slowly. Careful, she said. They're dusty. I've handled dust before, I replied. The first box was filled with old papers. Receipts. Envelopes. Nothing immediately useful. The second box was different. Inside, beneath a layer of folded cloth, I saw something small, black, rectangular, a phone. I reached for it. Caroline stepped forward. "I wouldn't touch that," she said. "Too fast. Too sharp." I picked it up anyway. It was old. Not a smartphone. A burner. I pressed the power button. Nothing. Dead. But something told me it hadn't always been. "Put that back," Caroline said. Her voice had changed again. "Not controlled anymore. Tight." "Why?" I asked calmly. "Because it's not yours. Neither is my checkbook," I replied. Silence. I turned the phone over in my hand, then slipped it into my pocket. Caroline stepped closer. "Give it to me." "No," I said. For a moment, I thought she might reach for me, physically. But she didn't. Instead, she stepped back and smiled. "Be careful, Sophia," she said softly. "You're stepping into things you don't understand." I met her gaze. "I understand more than you think." Another pause. Longer this time. Heavier. Then she exhaled slowly. "Fine," she said. "Keep it. It won't change anything." But it already had. Because as I turned toward the door, I noticed something else. A small metal tin. Locked. Tucked behind the boxes. I didn't reach for it. Not yet. Because I had enough for now. We walked back to the house in silence. But this time, it felt different. Not because I was being pushed out, but because I had stepped into something Caroline had tried very carefully to keep hidden, and she knew it. That night, after Emma returned from school and everything settled into its usual rhythm, I went back to my room and closed the door. I took the phone out of my pocket and sat down on the bed. Then I reached for the charging cable in my bag. Slowly, carefully, I plugged it in. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a faint light. The screen flickered, powered on. My pulse slowed, not with fear, with focus. Messages, dozens of them, all from the same contact. I opened the most recent one. "You think changing your name erased it? I remember everything." The next, "You owe me. And you know why." Another last payment wasn't enough. And then, a voicemail. My hand hovered over the screen for just a second. Then I pressed play. Static. A breath. Then a voice. "Male. Low. Controlled. You don't get to walk away from what happened to Laura," he said. "You were there. You signed it. You took your share." My chest tightened. "You can pretend all you want," he continued, "but I know exactly who you are. Caroline Hayes." The message ended. Silence filled the room. Not confusion. Not uncertainty. Truth. Clear. Undeniable. I sat there for a long time staring at the screen. Because now, it wasn't just suspicion. It wasn't just memory. It was proof. Caroline hadn't just lied about her past. She had built her entire life on top of it. And now, that foundation was starting to crack. And I was holding the first piece that could bring it all down. I didn't sleep at all that night. Not because I was afraid, but because I finally had something solid in my hands. Proof has a weight to it. Not physical, but undeniable. It settles into your mind differently than suspicion ever could. It sharpens your thoughts. It clears away doubt. And most importantly, it forces you to decide what kind of person you are going to be. At 5:30 inches the morning, I was already sitting at the small desk in my room, the burner phone in front of me, my notebook open. I replayed the voicemail again and again, not because I needed to understand it, I already did, but because I needed to hear it without emotion, without fear, only facts. You were there. You signed it. You took your share. Signed what took what, and most importantly, what exactly had happened to Laura Cole. I wrote everything down carefully. Ryan Cole equals Laura Cole's brother Caroline Hayes equals Caroline Bennett. Accusation present at incident accusation. Signed documents. Accusation received money. Then I added one more line. Ongoing payments equals silence. This wasn't just a past mistake. This was an active transaction. A soft knock on my door pulled me out of my thoughts. "Grandma Emma." I closed the notebook quickly. "Come in," I said. She stepped inside, still in her pajamas, her hair slightly messy, her eyes tired. "You're up early," she said. "So are you," I replied. She hesitated, then closed the door behind her. "I heard Mom again last night," she said quietly. My chest tightened. "What did she say?" Emma swallowed. "She said, I can't keep paying him like this. And if this gets out, everything's over." I nodded slowly, because that matched exactly what I had just confirmed. Emma looked at me carefully. "You know something, don't you?" she asked. There was no accusation in her voice, only trust. I took a deep breath. Then I made a decision. Not to tell her everything, but not to lie either. "Yes," I said gently. "I do." Her eyes widened slightly. "Is it bad?" I reached for her hand. "It's serious," I said, "but it's not your responsibility to fix it." She nodded, but I could see the worry in her face. "Is Mom in trouble?" she whispered. I paused, then answered honestly. "Yes." Emma didn't cry, didn't panic. She just sat there quietly processing something far too heavy for a 12-year-old. After a moment, she looked up at me. "What do we do?" she asked. "Not you, not I." That word settled something deep inside me. Because now I wasn't just protecting myself, I was protecting her. "We take this one step at a time," I said, "and we don't let anyone make us feel small or confused." "Do you understand?" she nodded. "Yes." Later that morning, after Emma left for school and Caroline disappeared into her office, I made my next move. I called Judith. She answered immediately. "Sophia, I have proof," I said. There was a pause. Then her voice sharpened. "What kind of proof?" I told her everything. The phone, the messages, the voicemail, the name. When I finished, she exhaled slowly. "That's not just leverage," she said. "That's evidence." "I thought so," I replied. "Do not lose that phone," she continued. "Do not show it to anyone else, and do not confront her again." "I won't," I said. There was a brief silence. Then Judith added something that made everything feel even more real. "I'm going to call someone," she said. "What kind of someone?" I asked. "A detective I used to work with," she replied. "He handles cases like this: fraud, coercion, elder manipulation." My grip tightened on the phone. "Do you think it's that serious?" "Yes," she said without hesitation. "And Sophia, I think it's bigger than you realize." That word lingered. Bigger. After we hung up, I sat there for a long time, not moving, not thinking in circles anymore, just seeing it clearly. Caroline wasn't just trying to control me. She was trying to contain a situation that was already slipping out of her hands. And Ryan, he wasn't just threatening her, he was pushing her, harder, faster, which meant one thing: she was running out of time. And when people run out of time, they make mistakes. That afternoon, I decided to test something. Carefully, subtly. At lunch, I walked into the kitchen while Caroline was preparing a salad. "I was thinking of going into town later," I said casually. She didn't look up. "For what?" "Just to stop by the bank," I replied, "and maybe speak with someone about account security." Her hand stopped, just for a fraction of a second. Then she continued cutting. "That's not necessary," she said. "I think it is," I replied, "given the circumstances." She looked up then, her eyes sharp, focused. "What circumstances?" she asked. I met her gaze. "The kind that involve unauthorized inquiries," I said calmly. Silence. Then she smiled. But this time, it wasn't warm. It was controlled. "You're overthinking things," she said. "Am I?" I asked. Another pause. Longer this time. Then she set the knife down. Slowly. Deliberately. "I think it would be best if we avoided unnecessary complications," she said. "There's nothing unnecessary about protecting my finances," I replied. Her eyes held mine, unblinking, and I think she said softly, "It would be best if you stayed here today." There it was. Not a suggestion. A boundary. Or rather, an attempt at one. I smiled. "I don't take instructions," I said gently. For a moment, something flickered in her expression. Not anger. Not yet. But something close. Then she leaned back slightly, recalculating. "Of course," she said. "You're free to do as you wish." But we both knew that wasn't entirely true. Because now, the lines had been drawn. Not openly, not dramatically, but clearly. And as I turned to leave the kitchen, I felt it. That shift, again. The one that happens right before everything changes. because Caroline Bennett had spent years controlling every detail of her life. But now, she was losing control of something much bigger, and I was no longer just observing it. I was part of it, and this time, I wasn't going to look away. I chose a time when the house felt most fragile, late afternoon, that quiet hour between routines when the light begins to soften, when people are tired enough to slip but not yet guarded for the evening. Michael was in the living room, sitting at the edge of the couch, his laptop open but untouched. He stared at the screen as if it might offer him answers he hadn't yet earned. "Michael," I said gently. He looked up, startled. "Yeah, can we talk?" He hesitated just long enough to tell me he already suspected this wouldn't be an easy conversation. "Sure," he said finally. We sat across from each other, not as mother and son, but as two people standing on opposite sides of something neither of us could ignore anymore. "I'm going to tell you something," I said, "and I need you to listen all the way through before you respond." He nodded slowly. "Okay." I reached into my pocket and placed the burner phone on the coffee table between us. His eyes flicked down to it. "What is that?" he asked. "Something your wife didn't expect me to find," I replied. His expression tightened slightly. "Mom, if this is about Caroline, it is," I said. "And it's about you too." He leaned back, already defensive. "I don't understand what's going on lately," he said. "You've been acting different." There it was, the narrative, already forming. "I've been paying attention," I said calmly. He shook his head slightly. "Caroline says you've been confused, that you've been moving things around, misplacing stuff. Did you see any of that yourself?" I asked. He stopped, just for a second, then looked away. "That's not the point," he muttered. "It is exactly the point," I said quietly. Silence settled between us, heavy, unavoidable. "Michael," I continued softer, "now do you trust me?" He looked up, his expression conflicted. Of course he trusted me, but trusting me meant questioning her, and that was something he had avoided for years. Yes, he said finally. "Of course I do." "Then listen," I said. I picked up the phone, powered it on, and opened the messages. Then I pressed play. The voicemail filled the room. "You don't get to walk away from what happened to Laura. You were there. You signed it. You took your share." Michael's face changed. Not instantly, but slowly, as the words settled, as the meaning began to form. When the message ended, the silence that followed was louder than anything that had come before. What is that?" he asked. "That," I said, "is the truth trying to surface." He shook his head almost immediately. No, that doesn't make sense." "Of course it doesn't," I replied. "It wasn't meant to." He stood up abruptly, pacing a few steps across the room. "This is crazy," he said. "Caroline would never. Her name isn't Caroline," I said quietly. That stopped him, what he said. "Not originally," I continued. "Her name was Caroline Hayes." He stared at me, blank, uncomprehending. "That's not no," he said quickly. "That's not true." I reached into my bag and pulled out the folder, slowly, carefully, then placed it beside the phone. "Look," I said. He hesitated, then picked it up. I watched his face as he read, watched the confusion shift, the doubt creep in, the resistance begin to crack. This doesn't prove anything," he said finally. But his voice was weaker now. "It proves enough to ask questions," I replied. "And you haven't been asking any." He ran a hand through his hair. "This is old," he said. "People have pasts. That doesn't mean—" "She's been paying someone," I interrupted. He froze. "Out of your accounts," I added. "Money you thought was going somewhere else." His head snapped toward me. "What are you talking about?" I met his gaze. "Check your business account," I said. "Look at the withdrawals, the ones labeled as renovation costs." His breathing slowed. Not calm, just focused. "I would have noticed that," he said. "Would you?" I asked gently. That question hit harder than any accusation. Because deep down, he knew the answer. He grabbed his phone and stepped away, scrolling quickly, his brow furrowing as he moved through numbers, dates, transactions. I said nothing, just watched. Minutes passed, then he stopped. His shoulders dropped slightly. That's not right," he murmured. "No," I said. "It's not." He looked up at me, and for the first time since this began, he wasn't defending her. "What is this?" he asked. "Extortion," I said simply. He swallowed. Hard. "From who?" "Ryan Cole," I replied. The name hung in the air. He didn't recognize it. Not yet. Who is that? He asked. Someone who knows exactly who your wife used to be, I said. He sank back onto the couch. Slowly. Like something inside him had just given way. This doesn't make sense, he said again. But this time, it sounded like a question, not a defense. It does, I said quietly. You just didn't want to see it. He looked at the phone, then the folder, then at me. Why didn't you tell me before? He asked. I held his gaze. Because I didn't have proof, I said. And because I hoped I was wrong. Silence. Then, she said, you were confused, he whispered. I nodded. I know. He let out a shaky breath. And the shed? Yes, I said. His eyes closed briefly. She told me it was for your comfort, he said. And you believed her, I replied. He didn't argue. Because he couldn't. I didn't think he started. No, I said gently. You didn't. That hurt him. I could see it. But it was the truth. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped tightly together. What do we do? He asked. The word echoed again. But this time, it felt different. Not strong. Not steady. Desperate. I studied him carefully. Because this was the moment. The one that mattered most. Not whether he believed me. He did now. But whether he would act. You tell the truth, I said. He shook his head immediately. No. No, we can't, Emma. This would destroy everything. There is no everything left, I replied quietly. He looked up at me, eyes wide. You don't understand, he said. If this gets out, me, Emma, our whole life was built on something that wasn't real, I said. Silence. Then softer. She talked to a lawyer, he admitted. My heart slowed. What kind of lawyer? He hesitated. About you, he said. About competency. There it was. Spoken out loud. Final. I nodded once. I know. He stared at me. You knew, he asked. Yes. Another silence. Then he covered his face with his hands. I didn't want to believe it, he whispered. I know, I said. And now I asked gently. He lowered his hands slowly. And for the first time, I saw it. Not confusion. Not denial. Clarity. Painful. Unavoidable. I don't know what to do, he said. And that was the truth. But it wasn't enough. Because not knowing doesn't stop what's coming. And something was coming. I could feel it. Closer now. Faster. And Caroline Bennett was already preparing for it. If there is one thing I learned over the years, it is this. People who build their lives on control don't collapse quietly. They fight. And when they fight, they don't always choose dignity. They choose survival. Caroline didn't wait long. By the next afternoon, she made her move. It began with a phone call. Not to me, not to Michael, but to an audience. By early evening, the house was no longer ours. It belonged to perception. Neighbors began arriving. Not many. Just enough. 2 women from church. 1 couple from down the road. A man Michael occasionally worked with. All invited under the same polite pretense. Just a small gathering. Nothing formal. But I knew better. Caroline greeted them at the door with her usual grace, smiling, composed every inch the woman they all admired. Oh, I'm so glad you could come, she said warmly. It's been such a stressful week. I thought we all needed something light. Light, yes. That's what she was offering them. A light version of the truth. I stayed in the living room at first, seated quietly, watching. Michael stood near the window, tense, distracted. He hadn't said much since our conversation, but he hadn't denied it either, and that mattered. Caroline moved through the room effortlessly, pouring drinks, guiding conversations, controlling the tone without anyone noticing, until she decided it was time. I actually wanted to share something, she said gently, drawing attention without demanding it. The room quieted. Of course it did. People always listen when the performance shifts. I've been dealing with something difficult lately, she continued, her voice soft, vulnerable. I felt it immediately. The setup. It's about Sophia, she said. All eyes turned to me. I didn't move, didn't react, just sat there. I didn't want to say anything, Caroline went on, but I think it's time we acknowledge what's been happening. A pause. Carefully placed. She's been struggling, she said. There it was. The narrative. She's been forgetting things, Caroline continued, misplacing items, becoming confused about simple details. One of the women frowned slightly. "Oh no. Really?" she asked. Caroline nodded sadly. "I've tried to handle it privately," she said, "for her dignity, but it's becoming harder to manage." I felt Michael shift behind me, uncomfortable, but silent. "She's been accusing me of things that simply aren't true," Caroline added. "Financial issues, strange claims about my past." She let the sentence trail off, as if it were too painful to finish. "It's not like her," she said softly. "And I'm worried." Worried. The room absorbed it. Concern replaced curiosity. Sympathy replaced skepticism. It was masterful, but not perfect, because she made one mistake. She spoke too much. I stood up slowly. The room stilled again, not because I demanded it, but because something had shifted. "May I say something?" I asked. Caroline smiled gently. "Of course, Sophia," she said. "We're all here for you." I looked around the room, at the faces, at the concern, at the quiet readiness to believe the version they had just been given. Then I spoke. "I am not confused," I said calmly. The simplicity of it cut through the room. "I have not forgotten anything," I continued. "Not names, not events, not details." Caroline's smile remained. But it tightened. "And I have not accused anyone of anything without reason," I added. A pause. Then I reached into my pocket and placed the burner phone on the table. "This," I said, "is one of several things I've found." Caroline's eyes flickered. Just for a second. But it was enough. "What is that?" one of the guests asked. "A phone," I replied. "Not mine." I picked it up, held it in my hand. "Would you like to hear what's on it?" I asked. Caroline stepped forward. "Sophia, I don't think this is appropriate." "I do," I said. And before she could stop me, I pressed play. The voicemail filled the room. "You don't get to walk away from what happened to Laura." Silence fell. Not polite silence, not social silence. Real silence. The kind that forces people to listen. When the message ended, no one spoke. Caroline stood very still. Then she laughed. Soft. Controlled. "This is exactly what I was talking about," she said. "Taking things out of context. Creating stories." "It's not a story," I said. She looked at me. And for the first time in front of others, there was no warmth in her expression. "You don't know what you're doing," she said quietly. "I do," I replied. Another pause. Then a new voice entered the room. "Actually, she might." Everyone turned. Judith stood in the doorway, calm, composed, and not alone. Behind her was a man I didn't recognize. Mid-40s, sharp eyes, observant. "I'm sorry to interrupt," Judith said, "but I think this conversation needs a little more clarity." Caroline's composure faltered. Just slightly. "And you are?" she asked. "Someone who doesn't enjoy watching elderly women be discredited for convenience," Judith replied evenly. The man beside her stepped forward. "Detective Harris," he said, showing a badge briefly. "I was asked to take a look at some information." The room shifted. Again. Not confusion now. Not sympathy. Uncertainty. Caroline recovered quickly. "This is ridiculous," she said. "There's been a misunderstanding." "Maybe," the detective said calmly, "but I'd like to understand it properly." He glanced at the phone. "May I?" I handed it to him. He listened. Carefully. Then nodded once. "Do you know Orion Cole?" he asked. Caroline didn't answer immediately. That hesitation said more than any denial could. "I think this conversation would be better," continued privately, she said, finally. "I think it's already public," Judith replied. The room was completely silent now. No one was on Caroline's side anymore. Not because they knew the truth, but because they had seen enough to doubt the lie. And doubt is where everything begins to fall apart. The detective handed the phone back to me. "We'll need to follow up on this," he said. Caroline's hands clenched slightly at her sides. "And Ryan Cole," Judith added calmly. "He's already on his way, isn't he?" That landed. Hard. Because this time, Caroline didn't deny it. She just looked at me. And in that look, there was something new. Not control. Not calculation. But urgency. Because now, her secret wasn't contained anymore. It was moving. And whatever was coming next would not be something she could manage alone. I stood there, steady, calm, watching it all unfold. Because for the first time since I arrived, I wasn't being pushed out of the story. I was standing at the center of it. And Caroline Bennett was no longer in control. By the time the last of the neighbors left, the house felt hollow, not quiet hollow, like something had been pulled out of it, leaving behind only the shape of what used to feel stable. Michael stood in the living room, unmoving. Judith remained near the doorway, arms folded, watchful. Detective Harris stepped outside, briefly speaking into his phone in low, measured tones. And Caroline? She was gone. "Where is she, Michael?" asked his voice tight. I didn't answer right away. Because I already knew. Judith glanced toward the back of the house. "She's not going to run," she said calmly. "Not yet." "No," I agreed quietly. "She's going to try to fix it." Michael turned to me. "Fix what?" Before I could respond, Detective Harris stepped back inside. "He's close," he said simply. The word landed. "Ryan." Michael's eyes widened slightly. "Who?" But before anyone could answer, we heard it. A car. Gravel crunching under tires. Slow, deliberate. Everyone turned toward the window. Headlights cut through the dimming evening light, sweeping across the yard before settling into stillness near the edge of the driveway. No one moved. Not immediately. Because something about that moment felt final. Then the engine shut off. And the silence that followed was heavier than anything that had come before. The driver's door opened. A man stepped out. Mid-40s, lean. Controlled in his movements. Not rushed, not hesitant, just certain. Ryan Cole. Even before he reached the porch, I could feel the shift in the house. Caroline appeared in the hallway. She hadn't changed her clothes, hadn't fixed her hair, hadn't even attempted to restore her usual composure. For the first time since I had known her, she looked exactly like what she was. Afraid. "Stay here," Michael said instinctively. But no one listened, because this wasn't something that could be contained anymore. The door opened. Ryan stepped inside without waiting to be invited. His eyes moved quickly across the room, taking everything in. Me, Michael, Judith, the detective, then finally, Caroline. "Well," he said, his voice low and almost conversational, "this is new." Caroline didn't speak, didn't move, just stood there. "You didn't tell me you had company," he added. "I didn't expect you to come here," she replied. "You stopped answering," he said simply. "That tends to get my attention." The air between them was thick. Not loud, not explosive, but heavy with history. "Who is this?" Michael asked, stepping forward. Ryan glanced at him briefly. "That depends," he said. "Who are you?" "I'm her husband," Michael replied. Ryan's expression shifted, just slightly. "Ah," he said. "So you're the one funding this." Michael froze. "What does that mean?" he asked. Ryan didn't answer him. He kept his eyes on Caroline. "You didn't tell him," he said. Caroline's jaw tightened. "Don't she?" said quietly. Ryan smiled. Not kindly. "Don't," what he asked. "Don't say the part where you helped clean up after my sister died." The room went completely still. Michael's face drained of color. What he said. Caroline stepped forward quickly. "That's not what happened," she said. "You don't know what you're talking about." "I know exactly what I'm talking about," Ryan interrupted. His voice wasn't raised, but it didn't need to be. "You were there," he said. "Before, after, and right in the middle of it." "That's not true," she snapped. "You signed the papers," he continued. "You backed the story. You took the money." "That was years ago," Caroline said. "And you think that makes it disappear," Ryan replied. Silence. Heavy. Unavoidable. Michael turned slowly toward her. "Caroline," he said. She didn't look at him. Didn't answer. "Tell me he's lying," Michael said. Still nothing. That silence was louder than any confession. "She didn't kill her," Ryan said after a moment. Everyone looked at him. "But she made sure no one asked the right questions," he added. Caroline closed her eyes briefly, as if that was the line she couldn't cross. "I didn't do anything wrong," she said quietly. Ryan laughed. "No," he said. "You just made sure no one else could prove that someone did." Detective Harris stepped forward then. "I think that's enough," he said calmly. Ryan turned toward him. "And you are?" he asked. "Someone who's been listening long enough," the detective replied. Ryan nodded slowly. "Good," he said. "Then you know I'm not the problem here." "No," the detective said, "but extortion is." That landed. Ryan didn't react immediately. Then he smiled again. "Is that what she told you?" he asked. "She didn't tell me anything," the detective replied. "You did." A pause. Then, "I wanted the truth out," Ryan said. "By taking money," Judith asked. "By forcing her to face it," he corrected. Caroline laughed softly. "Face what she said. Something that was already buried." Ryan's eyes hardened. "It was never buried," he said. "You just walked away." Silence. Then, slowly, Caroline looked at him, and for the first time, she stopped pretending. "Yes," she said. The word landed like a weight. "I walked away," she continued, "because there was nothing left to stay for." Michael staggered back slightly. "Caroline," he whispered. She turned to him then, and in her eyes, there was no apology. "Everything we have," she said, "I built." "On what?" he asked. She didn't answer. Because she didn't need to. He already knew. The detective stepped forward again. "We're going to need statements," he said. "From all of you." No one argued. No one resisted. Because the moment had passed. The truth was out. And there was no putting it back. I stood there watching it all unfold. Not with satisfaction. Not with anger. But with something quieter. Clarity. Because this was never about revenge. It was about truth. And now, that truth had finally been spoken out loud, even if it came too late to save what had already been broken. After the words settled, everything moved very quickly, too quickly for emotions to catch up, too quickly for denial to rebuild itself. Because once truth enters a room like that fully, clearly, without disguise, there is no going back to the version of reality that came before it. Detective Harris didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Mr. Cole," he said calmly, "I'm going to need you to come with me." Ryan didn't resist. He didn't argue. He didn't even look surprised. Instead, he gave a small, almost tired nod, as if this outcome had always been part of the plan. "I figured," he said. As the detective stepped closer, Ryan glanced once more at Caroline. Not with anger, not with satisfaction, but with something heavier. "Truth has a way of catching up," he said quietly. Caroline didn't respond. She stood still, her hands at her sides, her expression unreadable. Ryan turned, allowing the detective to guide him toward the door. Just before he stepped outside, he paused. "Whatever you think you buried," he said without looking back, "it never stayed there." Then he was gone. The door closed, and the house fell into a silence so complete it felt almost unreal. Michael didn't move at first. He stood there staring at the space Ryan had just occupied, as if expecting him to reappear and undo everything that had just happened. But no one came back. No one corrected the story. No one said it was a misunderstanding. Because it wasn't. "Caroline," he said finally. His voice was barely above a whisper. She didn't answer. "Tell me something," he said louder now. "Anything that makes this make sense." Still nothing. I watched her carefully. Because this was the moment that mattered. Not the exposure, not the confrontation, but the aftermath. The part where people either step into the truth or disappear from it. Caroline chose neither. She turned slowly and walked toward the hallway. Not running. Not collapsing. Just leaving. Caroline, Michael called after her. She stopped, but didn't turn around. "What happened?" he asked. "What did you do?" A long pause. "Then I survived," she said. The words hung in the air. Michael stared at her back, confusion etched across his face. "That's not an answer," he said. She turned then, slowly, and for the first time, there was no performance, no mask, no carefully crafted version of herself. Just the truth. "I did what I had to do," she said. To what he asked? To who? Her eyes flickered for just a moment, then steadied. "To move forward," she replied. Michael shook his head. "That doesn't mean anything." "It means everything," she said quietly. Silence stretched between them. Then he asked the question he had been avoiding since the moment the truth began to surface. "Did you take the money?" Caroline didn't hesitate this time. "Yes." The word landed harder than anything else she had said. Michael staggered back slightly, as if something inside him had physically shifted. "From that case?" he asked. "Yes. And you never told me." "No." Another pause. "And you've been paying him," Michael continued. "All this time." "Yes." Each answer was simple, clean, undeniable. Michael let out a breath that sounded more like something breaking than something releasing. Why? He asked. Caroline looked at him. Really looked at him. Because he wouldn't let it go, she said. And you thought this was better, Michael asked. Lying, taking money, planning to, he stopped. To what? She asked quietly. He couldn't say it. But I could. Remove me, I said. They both turned toward me. Caroline's expression didn't change, but Michael's did. Is that true? He asked her. She didn't answer, and that was answer enough. Michael ran a hand through his hair, pacing now, his movements restless, unsteady. This isn't real, he said. This can't be real. But it was. Every part of it. And the longer he stood there, the more it settled into him. Until finally, he stopped and looked at me. Not as someone confused, not as someone defensive, but as someone who understood exactly what had been done. I'm sorry, he said. The words were quiet, but they were real. I nodded once. I know, I said, but knowing didn't erase anything. It didn't undo the silence, the doubt, the choice to believe someone else over me, and he knew that too. I didn't want to see it, he said. No, I replied gently. You didn't. Emma appeared in the doorway then. I hadn't even heard her come in. She stood there, small and still, her eyes moving between her parents. Is it over? She asked softly. No one answered right away, because no one knew what over meant anymore. Caroline looked at her daughter, and for a moment, something flickered. Not guilt, not regret, something more complicated. Then it was gone. Yes, she said. Emma nodded slowly. Then she walked across the room, past her mother, and stopped beside me. She reached for my hand, held it tightly, and didn't let go. That moment said more than anything else that had happened that day. Because in the end, children don't choose sides based on words. They choose based on truth. And she had seen enough to know where that truth was. Caroline watched it happen, didn't stop her, didn't argue, because she understood something now that she hadn't before. This wasn't something she could control anymore. Not with charm, not with manipulation, not with silence. The detective returned shortly after. We'll need you to come in as well, he said to Caroline. She nodded, not surprised, not resistant, just done. Michael stepped back as she walked past him. He didn't try to stop her, didn't reach for her, because whatever they had built together had already collapsed, and there was nothing left to hold on to. The door closed again, and this time, it didn't feel hollow. It felt clear, painful, heavy, but clear. I looked down at Emma, her small hand still wrapped around mine, and in that moment, I understood something that mattered more than anything else. This wasn't about what had been lost. It was about what could still be protected, and for the first time since this all began, I knew exactly what that was. The house felt different after Caroline left. Not empty, not broken, just honest. For the first time since I had arrived, nothing inside it was pretending to be something else. And that kind of honesty, even when it hurts, is quieter than you expect. That night, Emma didn't go to her room. She stayed close. Not clinging, not crying, just present. She sat beside me on the couch, her small frame tucked into the corner, her hand still resting lightly against mine as if letting go might change something. Can I stay here tonight? She asked softly. Of course, I said. Michael stood a few feet away watching us. He looked older than he had that morning. Not physically, but in the way his shoulders carried something heavier now. Something real. I didn't know, he said again. Not as a defense, not as an excuse, just a statement he needed to say out loud. I believe you, I replied. And I did. That was the tragedy of it. He hadn't been cruel. He had been weak. And weakness can be just as damaging. He nodded slowly as if that mattered to him more than forgiveness. I should have seen it, he added. Yes, I said gently. Silence followed. But it wasn't hostile. It wasn't sharp. It was the kind of silence that comes when truth settles into place and everyone is adjusting to it. Emma can stay with you tonight, he said after a moment. I looked at him. Just tonight, I asked. He hesitated, then shook his head. No, he said quietly. As long as she needs. Emma looked up at him. Are you sure? She asked. He knelt down in front of her. And for the first time since all of this began, he looked like a father trying to do the right thing. "I'm sure," he said. "You should be somewhere you feel safe." Emma nodded, then leaned forward and hugged him. Not tightly, not desperately, just enough. When she pulled away, he didn't stop her, didn't try to hold on longer, because he understood. Some things you don't get to keep. Later that night, after Emma had fallen asleep beside me on the couch, I sat quietly in the dim light, listening to the stillness of the house. Michael had gone upstairs. I could hear him moving around, slow, deliberate steps, like someone trying to figure out how to exist in a space that no longer felt familiar. Around midnight, he came back down. He didn't speak right away, just stood there for a moment, looking at us. At Emma. At me. "I talked to a lawyer," he said finally. I looked up. "Already." He nodded. "I needed to understand what comes next," he said. "And I asked." He exhaled slowly. "There's going to be an investigation," he said. "Financial records, statements, everything." I nodded. "That's expected." He hesitated, then added, "They're going to look at my accounts too." "Of course they would." "I didn't know where the money was going," he said quickly. "I know," I replied. "But I should have," he said. "Yes," I said again. Another silence. Then he sat down across from me. "I don't want to lose Emma," he said. The honesty in his voice was different this time, not defensive, not reactive. Real. "You won't," I said. "Not if you start making the right decisions now." He nodded slowly. "What does that look like?" he asked. I studied him carefully. Because this wasn't about telling him what to do, it was about whether he was ready to hear it. "It looks like taking responsibility," I said. He swallowed. "It looks like telling the truth even when it makes you uncomfortable." He nodded. "And it looks like understanding that rebuilding trust doesn't happen quickly," I added. His eyes dropped. "I know," he said. But this time, I believed him. Because he wasn't asking for forgiveness. He was asking for direction. And that was a beginning. The next morning, everything moved forward. Quietly, but firmly. Michael canceled his meetings. Made calls. Started organizing documents. Emma packed a small bag. Not much. Just clothes, a book, and the little stuffed animal she had kept since she was 5. She didn't ask questions. Didn't hesitate. She just stayed close to me. By midday, I had made my decision. "I'm going back to my condo," I told Michael. He looked up. "You still have it?" he asked. "I never sold it," I said. That surprised him. "Why not?" he asked. I held his gaze. "Because something didn't feel right," I said. He nodded slowly. "That was smart," he admitted. "It was careful," I replied. "There's a difference." He stood there for a moment, then said something I didn't expect. "Can I help you move?" he asked. I considered it, then shook my head gently. "No," I said. "This is something I need to do myself." He nodded. Didn't argue, because he understood. Some distances are necessary. Emma stood beside me as I gathered my things. "Can I come with you?" she asked. I looked at Michael. He didn't hesitate. "Yes," he said. Emma's shoulders relaxed slightly, and in that moment, I saw it. Not fear, not confusion, relief. Because children don't just need love, they need stability. And for the first time in a long time, she felt like she had it. We left that afternoon. The drive was quiet. Emma sat beside me, looking out the window, her expression thoughtful. "Grandma," she said after a while. "Yes. Are we okay?" I reached over and took her hand. "Yes," I said. And for the first time since this all began, that answer felt completely true. Not because everything was fixed, not because the past had disappeared, but because we were no longer living inside a lie. And sometimes, that's the most important step toward healing. As we pulled into the driveway of my condo, the familiar sight of it brought something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. Not perfect. Not complete. But real. And as Emma stepped out of the car beside me, holding her small bag and looking around with quiet curiosity, I realized something simple. We hadn't just left something behind. We had stepped into something better. Not easier. Not simpler. But honest. And that was enough. The first night back in my condo was quieter than I remembered. Not silent, never silent, but steady. The kind of quiet that doesn't press against your chest or make you wonder what's happening behind closed doors. The kind that allows you to breathe without listening for footsteps. Emma slept in the room across the hall. I had made the bed earlier that afternoon, smoothing the sheets the way I used to when Michael was a boy, simple, careful, familiar. She had stood in the doorway watching me, her small bag resting at her feet, as if she wasn't quite sure whether she was allowed to belong there. "You can put your things wherever you like," I told her. She nodded but didn't move right away. "Is it okay if I keep the light on?" she asked. "Yes," I said gently, "for as long as you need." That night, I didn't sleep much. Not because I was afraid, but because everything that had happened still echoed, not loudly but persistently. Caroline's voice, Ryan's words, Michael's silence, Emma's hand in mine. It all felt close, but no longer overwhelming, because now it was behind us, not erased, but contained. The next few days settled into something new, a rhythm we built slowly without forcing it. Mornings were simple. Breakfast at the small kitchen table, toast, tea, sometimes eggs if Emma felt like helping. She didn't talk much at first, but she watched everything. The way I moved, the way I spoke, the way nothing in this space felt rushed or controlled. By the third morning, she asked a question. "Grandma, do people change after something like that?" I set my cup down. "Sometimes," I said. "And sometimes not?" she asked. "Yes," I replied. She thought about that, then nodded. "I think Dad will," she said quietly. I didn't answer right away, because hope is a fragile thing, and I didn't want to give her more than I could promise. "I think he wants to," I said finally. Emma accepted that, because at her age, wanting to believe is often enough. Michael called later that afternoon. "I spoke to the investigator again," he said. His voice sounded different, less certain, but more honest. And I asked, "They're reopening parts of the Cole case," he said, "looking into the financial transfers, the statements Caroline made back then." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "And Caroline?" I asked. He hesitated. "She's cooperating," he said, "but it's not looking good." No, it wasn't. I told them everything, he added. That mattered. "I'm glad," I said. There was a pause. "Emma okay?" he asked. I glanced toward the living room where she sat quietly reading. "She's safe," I said. Another pause. "Can I come see her?" he asked. I considered it. Not long, but carefully. "Yes," I said, "but we take it slow." "I understand," he replied. And for the first time in a long time, I believed that he did. When he arrived the next day, he didn't try to act like nothing had happened. He didn't smile too much, didn't pretend things were normal. He just stood in the doorway, waiting. Emma looked at him, then at me. "It's okay," I said softly. She walked toward him slowly, not running, not hesitating, and when she reached him, she hugged him. He held her carefully, as if he understood that trust is something you hold gently, not tightly. They talked for a while. Simple things, school, her books, what she wanted to do that weekend. Not the past. Not yet. And that was enough. After he left, Emma sat beside me again. "He's different," she said. "Yes," I replied. "Do you think it will last?" she asked. I looked at her. At the way she asked, not with fear, but with cautious hope. "I think it depends on what he does next," I said. She nodded. Because even at 12, she understood that change isn't something you say, it's something you prove. Weeks passed. Slowly, steadily. The investigation continued. Caroline remained under scrutiny. Financial records uncovered more than anyone expected. Old decisions resurfaced. Details that had once been buried were now impossible to ignore. I didn't follow every update. Didn't need to. Because my life was no longer centered on what she had done. It was centered on what we were building now. Emma settled into a routine. School nearby. Afternoons at the park. Evenings with homework and quiet conversations. Sometimes she asked questions. About truth. About trust. About why people lie. And I answered as honestly as I could. Because it's easier in the moment, I told her once. And harder later, she asked. "Yes," I said. Much harder. Michael continued to come by. Not every day. Not too often. But consistently. And that mattered more than anything. He didn't try to rush things. Didn't ask for forgiveness he hadn't earned. He showed up. Listened. Learned. And slowly, piece by piece, He began to rebuild something that had nearly been lost. One evening, as Emma and I sat on the balcony watching the sun dip below the trees, she leaned her head against my shoulder. "Grandma," she said. "Yes. Are you glad you didn't stay?" I looked out at the quiet street, at the soft light, at the stillness that felt like peace instead of tension. "Yes," I said. She smiled slightly. "Me too," she whispered. I wrapped my arm gently around her, because in the end, that was the truth that mattered most. Not what had been taken, not what had been hidden, but what had been protected. I had almost been erased, reduced, pushed aside. But I wasn't. I saw it. I stood in it. I refused to disappear. And because of that, Emma didn't have to grow up inside a lie. That was the victory. Not loud, not dramatic, but real. And as the last light of the day faded into something soft and steady, I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to feel before. We were going to be okay. Not because everything had been fixed, but because we had chosen truth. And that is where healing begins. There is a quiet danger in growing older that no one prepares you for. Not the physical changes, not the slowing down, but the way the world can begin to treat you as if you are no longer central to your own life, as if your voice carries less weight, as if your presence is something to be managed rather than respected. But age does not erase wisdom, and silence does not mean weakness. What happened to me was not just about betrayal. It was about something deeper, the moment when a family begins protecting comfort instead of truth, when people choose what is easy to believe over what is right to face. And that is where real damage begins. Because the truth does not disappear just because we ignore it. It waits. It grows. And eventually it demands to be seen. I could have stayed quiet. I could have accepted the role they tried to give me, small, confused, dependent, but I didn't. And because I didn't, something important was saved. Not just my dignity, but Emma's future. She saw what truth looks like. She saw what it means to stand your ground not with anger, but with clarity. And that lesson will stay with her far longer than any lie ever could. Love without boundaries becomes self-betrayal, and family without honesty becomes something fragile and unsafe. But when you choose truth, even when it costs you comfort, you create something stronger. Something real. If you were in my place, would you have spoken up sooner? Or would you have waited like I did? I'd truly love to hear your thoughts. Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. I read every single comment. And if this story meant something to you, please like and subscribe. There are many more stories like this about truth, strength, and the quiet courage it takes to protect what truly matters.